This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Gabrielle Bell. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, we have the pleasure of talking with Gabrielle Bell. Her new book, Everything Is Flammable, came out recently from Uncivilized Books. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse comics at 40% off at the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you can find that those discounts are going to be from 20 to 35% off cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price, sometimes 50% off the cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
And since we're talking to Gabrielle Bell in this episode, you can check out DCB Service, and you can find that Drawn and Quarterly has available a couple of her works, Cecil and Jordan in New York, and Lucky, the collection of some of her mini comics that we talk about a little bit towards the end. And both of these books are 25% off, so you can check those out at dcbservice.com.
That's right. It's a great place to get those books from Gabrielle Bell and other comics. That's dcbservice.com. You got to go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
Well, Andy, this was a fun interview, and it's something that you and I have been wanting to do for quite a while now.
Yeah. I think we've talked about Gabrielle's work before in several different occasions, including not only including her recent collections over the last few years, but also in the Best American Comics volumes, where she was for a while a regular. Having regular appearances. Yeah,
in fact, she was in last year's. In fact, a portion of what we will find in Everything Is Flammable was in the Best American Comics 2016.
Right.
Yeah. As I said, this was a long time in coming. We had even reached out to her back in 2014, 3 years ago, around the time of Truth is Fragmentary, but she just had too much going on at the time. So I really appreciate the fact that she was willing to take the time to talk with us this time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and start listening to that interview, but we should let all of our listeners know that we talked with her through the phone, or we were on Skype, and we called her up via Skype on her telephone. And there are a few occasions throughout the conversation where she fades out just for a few seconds. So just note that it's not anything about the recording that's off. It's just the phone signal apparently went out just briefly, but it's really not a problem because you can understand what she's saying from the context.
Yep. We're here today with Gabrielle Bell, whose new book, Everything Is Flammable, has recently come out from Uncivilized Books. And I'm also really glad that we're talking to you in July, in the middle of July, because you're also in the midst of your annual July diary, which is something I look forward to every year. Mm-hmm. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And in fact, I wanted to start out with the July diary because I've really been enjoying it so far, and for those listeners who may not have gotten into it, they should go check it out at GabrielleBell.com. So you're currently in Minneapolis right now, like pet sitting for Tom Kaczynski, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how's the dog and cat doing?
They're doing fine. They're just, being animals. They're just doing their thing. I'm doing my thing here. They're doing their thing. I try to keep them alive.
Is one of the things I really love about what you do with the animals, and this shows up in other diaries where animals are involved too, is that you give them voices, and the dog Ivy, especially. I've got a couple dogs and a bunch of cats, but I feel like that's like a kind of perfect dog voice, especially in the latest strip where, okay, we're going into this room. Okay, well then we're going back into this room. So, and I often have, when I'm alone, have two-sided conversations with my dogs too. So.
Yeah, it seems very easy to just develop conversations with the animals. It's very easy to anthropomorphize.
Yeah, and you do a good job of getting into, let's say, Ivy's mind. There are a couple of times where you're taking her out to go walking, and I think in one strip at one point you don't know why this is the one from the 10th of July. You're not sure why she's dragging or she's laying down when you're trying to go for walkies. And then you imagine what that street might be like for her with all the smells and all.
Yeah. But I mean, we really have no idea what's going on. It was just a conjecture, but I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know what's happening in there.
It does seem like in the last, I don't know, a few diary, even last or the earlier diaries, and some of the stuff that's up on your Patreon page too, that animals are showing up a lot, dog, pets and stuff. And I know your Patreon campaign is basically leading to the possibility of adopting a dog when you hit a certain amount. And so I'm just wondering how pets have been kind of fitting in to, or animals and so on have been fitting into your work lately, especially in these diaries.
I don't know. I mean, in a way, it sort of feeds into itself because it's so relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, I basically get encouraged because people just love it. That people with animals tend to relate. So yeah, part of it is just easy, I guess. And but then I guess I have no idea.
I feel like we're building
it easier for me to deal with than people. It's kind of like a stepping stone to dealing with. I mean, there's like it's not as difficult as other people. Did you guys ever read this? Well, it's a play. I read this play. It was called The Jesus Story. And it's just like these two people talking on the bench.
Yeah.
On a bench in the park. And this guy is talking about how he could not relate to humans. So he just tried to make friends with a dog. And like that was his way of trying to connect with the world. Was through a dog. I don't think it was such a long time since I've read this, but it did have an impact on me because, I mean, it's not like I'm shutting humans out entirely, but in a way, dogs are like training wheels or something.
Yeah,
they're a little bit easier than people.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're heading in. There's like if there's going to be a narrative in your diaries, we're heading to a place where you have to get a dog, or like your audience is going to be really, really disappointed.
this is terrible. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, that's not fair to this potential dog.
Yeah. And getting a dog may help offset the anxiety and ennui.
Anxiety, really? You think so?
Well, maybe not, but maybe momentary reprieves.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a dog is just another thing.
Yeah, we get
fun to riff on.
We have we have 2 dogs, and we got a second dog like a year ago, and I'm just letting him go to the, that's a whole, because we got a dog named, and we named him Sherlock, and decided that there needed to be a Watson to balance it out.
That is not the reason.
And I realized that this is something that I started thinking about a lot when I was reading your stuff, is that I just let the second dog just goes to the bathroom wherever he wants to. And I realized this is the reason why I don't have kids, because that would have been like my, I would have had a kid with, going to the bathroom all the time and not doing anything about it, like letting it go for a day, like I'm doing with the dog. So it was a good, if you ask like the reason why I have why I got a second dog.
Although this dog is kind of like a second sibling who gets away with more than the first one.
To reinforce why I don't have kids. Yeah.
Yeah, well, some of us just can't have kids, so gotta care for something, I guess.
Well, Gabrielle, getting back to your July Diaries, now you've been doing the July Diary, I guess except for 2015, since 2012, correct?
Yeah, I did one for 2015 too, actually.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't publish it until it did. I mean, it was actually published in Everything Is Flammable, sort of edited down and abridged. But like the last chapter, not the last chapter, like one of the last chapters is actually July Diary. But nobody really knew that.
Well, where did the idea come up for you to do this annual July Diary?
I just, I just wanted to, one year, I guess it was 2011, I wanted to challenge myself, and it just seemed like a good thing to set myself a challenge of doing a comic every day for a month. And I think it was hard. I remember it was incredibly difficult, but it was very gratifying, and it seemed like it was popular with people. People seemed to really, really encourage me. I mean, like, if it didn't go over so well and nobody noticed it, I probably wouldn't have continued. But I liked the nice reception it got, and I just can't really seem to motivate myself enough to draw comics at such a rapid rate otherwise. So about every year I seem to also forget how hard it is. So then it became one of the only traditions in my life. I don't usually stick with things, but I stuck with that. Yeah, somehow, like, during the summertime, I tend to be at my most creative. I get the seasonal affective disorder, so I kind of want to take advantage of the creative and motivated energy that I have, or something, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I appreciate about your July Diaries is the fact that after a while, actually sometimes quickly into the month, they become your demon. And I know the first July that's collected in the book Truth is Fragmentary, it seems like you're just a few days in and already you're regretting the fact that your You've committed yourself to this.
Yeah.
And so, and I love the kind of push and pull throughout the month between you doing what you do, but then not wanting to do it, but forcing yourself to. And that's where a good part of the humor is embedded in these comics.
Huh. Yeah, every year it's become easier, like within the first half, like the first, I don't know, maybe during the first week or first 10 days, I'll be like, oh, this is easy. I can do a comic about anything. And it just comes very smoothly. And then somewhere, I think around mid-month, which is like right now, I tend to hit a wall and I'm like, whoa, I've run out of ideas. And then I start sort of scraping around and stuff. So, I just hope that it's not as bad this year.
Well, I end up appreciating it because it just reminds that those kind of moments in the diary, because it reminds me of teaching, and that I get to a point probably halfway through the semester where I want to curse at the guy who made the syllabus for my class, and decided to be that ambitious for the class, and realizing we weren't going to get through everything, or that I didn't even want to read the stuff that I'd put on the syllabus anymore. So I think that idea of kind of ambition plus I don't know what's the other,
like when you get halfway through a project and you just want to scrap it and do something else.
Yeah.
But that there's another guy, there was another guy in the past, a separate person who had this ambition, and he is my nemesis.
Yeah. Yeah, who would make me do this? It's just cruel and stupid. Totally pointless.
Kind of transitioning into Everything is Flammable, I guess. So this is really like, we've been following your work for a long time, and this is really like your first full length memoir, right? Like where it was a continuous narrative throughout.
Yeah.
So what was it about this particular experience with your mother's house burning down and going to help her out? What was it about that you thought would lend itself to a longer work like this?
I don't know. I've tried to do full-length books before, and they just lose steam. This one, I don't know. It had this momentum. It didn't lose the momentum. I just kept working on it till I was done. Part of it, I think, is my mom. She's somehow like some kind of muse to me, or inspiration. Like something about her keeps me going. I don't know. I mean, I can't really say exactly.
Did it start out?
Whatever, but
did it start out as a full-length idea, or did it just evolve that way?
It very much evolved that way. I just was going there and writing. I was just writing all these little vignettes and stuff, and at some point it just made sense that it would be a book. And then when that point came, I really started, thinking of it as a whole and stuff. But it's also like very real time.
Mm-hmm. I remember reading in one of your earlier interviews that you seem to prefer the short story form, and not just in terms of your own art, but also in the kind of prose fiction that you read. Do you, after doing this longer narrative, Everything Is Flammable, do you still feel that way? In other words, do you think you're going to try to do another longer narrative with your next book, or maybe in a couple of books, or do you still prefer the short story form?
I still prefer the short story form. I think it's the best. But I'm going to still try to do longer stuff too. Partly because the market demands that, but also partly because I think it's one way to challenge oneself. I mean, it's one way of many ways, but yeah, no, I think that a long graphic story would be equal to like taking time to read it would take the same length or time as a short prose story, or like, I mean, it's comics take a long time to do and a very short time to read. But yeah, no, I'm going to keep trying. I hope to have another. It was a very good feeling to be engaged in a long form work in a way that, like, I used to envy my friends working on graphic novels. Like, there is a sort of you finish a short story and then you sort of flail around until you figure out the next project you're going to do, and then you do that. But with a long work, you don't have to worry about what you're going to do next for a long time. You're just like constantly engaged with the same thing. It was a good feeling. But I do love short works a lot too. So yes and yes.
Now, when Andy asked you a moment ago if it started out as a longer graphic memoir, you said it didn't begin that way. At what point in doing the work that's included in Everything Is Flammable did it occur to you, oh, I want to commit myself to something a little different from what I've usually done in the past, a long-form narrative?
I really can't pinpoint an exact time. But I know I was getting more and more excited about that fact. But I really just can't remember. I don't know if it came as like some revelation or something. I mean, I was just going there. I mean, I don't want to sound too like fake humble or something. I was just going there to help my mom. And but no, I mean, I really, my mom's house burned down. I wanted to go help her, and I also wanted to do comics about it. But that wasn't, I mean, even though I sort of talk about it in the book and I'm like, oh, I want to be a hero. I mean, or I wanted to make comics about it or whatever. But I mean, the first thing in my mind is I did want to help my mom, and like the comics were, I don't want to say secondary, but I wasn't like, I'm going to make a book about this and get rich. Maybe I did think that sometimes, but then I was like, and my mom a bigger house. So, I mean, I think maybe, caring about something outside of myself was very helpful in creating the book.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of times this kind of inner struggle, something that you just mentioned, helping your mother, but at the same time using the occasion as grist for your comics mill and feeling potentially guilty for doing so.
Struggle. I mean, I think that any artist that's what they do. They make art from their life. I was just more acknowledging it. I think I wanted to address the fact that this was part of the whole process. Like when I mean, it's not true. I'm not like this objective I'm part of the story, and so I have to address my own things that I'm dealing with. But I mean, I also did feel I more felt guilty because the struggle was that my mom was not so happy about being written about. Yeah, I mean, it was just, I don't think that. I mean, on one hand, it is a kind of exploitation. And on the other hand, that's what artists do. They take life and they turn it into something that ends up being for a public eye rather than like the personal situation. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And in fact, that reminds me, there are a couple of times in your collection, Truth is Fragmentary, where you reference Philip Roth and issues of autobiography. And I know that's someone who at least used to be somewhat notorious for using his own life and the events and maybe masking it thinly in fiction and then presenting it to the public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've read my share of Philip Roth, and I don't know what is true and what isn't in it, but I think that, I mean, every writer, no matter how non-fictional they are, they gotta be using stuff from their own life because that's all they know. I mean, even if they're writing about something that has nothing to do with their own life, they have only their own life as a reference point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know the situation with Philip Roth, but I think most writers do tend to upset people sometimes. I'm not saying it's right either.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, my mom coming across a story I wrote that was a loosely veiled story about something that happened probably the week before. And that was not a fun moment in my life.
Yeah, it can be like, I mean, yeah, it's the most interesting stuff is the stuff that's going to be painful for whoever is involved.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to always be a sort of tightrope walk, or it's always going to be some kind of negotiation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I think the title for the book, Everything Is Flammable, is really perfect for this particular work, because while it starts out with the literal house burning down, I mean, part of what the narrative, as the narrative develops, is the kind of flammability of human relationships too, especially when you're dealing with your relationship with your mother, but also hinting at some of the things that have happened in the past that have been kind of the tinders for that. Right. So I don't know if that was leading to a question or anything, but I just, as I was reading it, that the kind of poetry of that title really struck me.
Yeah, that was some of my books are easier to title than others.
Well, you can also see that in not only, Gabrielle, your relationship with your mother, but also your mother's relationship with others around her. For instance, her neighbor, what's his name? Who lives on the property? Gus, yes. Yeah, that seemed... that relationship that you illustrated throughout the book seems one that is quite complex and complicated and could go in any number of directions given certain context. So in light of what Andy was saying, something that is rather flammable.
Mm. Yeah, well, she's a good person and he's a good person, and they do have this kind of, you're right, it's kind of a flammable rapport, but they're actually fine. We're doing fine.
Do you get asked that a lot, by the way? Like, how's your mother doing, or how's Gus?
I do. I get asked a lot. Yeah.
How is your mother doing, by the way?
I think she's doing good. She's actually doing very good. She's teaching herself Chinese, actually, on an app on her phone.
Wow.
So, yeah, she's every day she's studying Chinese and writing characters down on a piece of paper. And I don't know, doing what she always does, reading and sitting around reading, gardening. So yeah, I just visited her last a few weeks ago. We went on a little trip and had a little vacation.
Is the house still doing
Gus
okay?
is doing good too. Oh yeah, the best thing that's happened is there's like this fantasy sequence in the book where I imagine Gus building a big old extension and making the house bigger and bigger. And in fact, he has. He's built another room onto it, as well as the bathroom that he built onto it. And he built a nice porch. And it's really nice. He's a really good carpenter. It's really... Well, it was I was up there and it was literally over 100 degrees up there.
Yeah.
Super hot, painfully hot. But he had built this so well that it was surprisingly cool in the extra room because he had the way he set up the porch in the room so that there was this cross breeze. So it was a really comfortable house. So yeah, they're doing really well. And I go and I stay in the trailer, and it's a great place to visit because there's no internet and thus no responsibilities. Nothing I don't have to answer any emails anytime I go there, and I don't have to do anything. I just can hang out. We read whole New Yorker articles. We pass them back and forth. We actually finish whole magazines and books. It's a really nice place to be now. We still have our troubles, and she still has her troubles, and Margaret and Gus, they have their problems, but they get along better too. So I stepped in and saved the day is basically the story.
Well, I'm really envious. I feel like my New Yorker subscription is aspirational. That I dream of someday. In fact, when I moved recently, I threw out so many old New Yorkers, and that I had dreamed of someday having time to read.
Yeah, no, it was. I actually I rented this little cabin on the coast. And we spent 3 days there. I wanted to give her a vacation, and that was nice, but the vacation for me really was being at her house because it was a forced vacation.
Well, how does she and also Gus feel about being main characters in your new book?
I think both of them were trepidatious about it. My mom, I don't think she liked it very much. I think Gus had mixed feelings. I think anybody, I don't know, I've never been the subject of a whole book, so I wouldn't really know how it feels. But I think probably both of them, if they could have had more control over their characters and how they were portrayed, they would have changed it a lot. I mean, if they could have written the book, they would have told a different story, or at least portrayed it in a different way. So I really can't say what they. I mean, they're probably not really telling me how they really feel, except Gus said that that's not what he looked like. He had some problems with the way I portrayed him in his hobo days. But yeah, I don't really know exactly, but they're not suing me.
Yeah.
Do you usually, when you represent people that you know in your comics, do you usually run it by them before you get it out there?
If it's a sensitive thing, I do, because I don't want to lose friends over my comics. Yeah, I'll ask them how they feel about it, and I'll be if it's very sensitive, I'll ask them if I can do a comic about it, or if I can put that in a comic. Even if somebody tells me an embarrassing story, I'll be can I put this in a comic? And then I'll run it by them. Yeah, I don't want to lose friends or anything. It's not that important. And I can I change details, and I can hide identities and stuff.
It occasionally seems to become a topic in your diary comics too, that you will have about what how people feel about their representations in your comics and things like that. But also, do you have situations where people like introduce a conversation with you and say, please don't make a comic about this, but
yes, I've heard that. Yes, people have confided in me, and they've they've begun it by saying, do not put this in a comic. I think probably sometimes people will tell me stories too in hopes that it'll be in a comic, which is nice for me. It makes my job easier. They're doing my work for me.
Well, someone who seems to be a recurring character in many of your comics is your friend Tony. What kind of role does he play, not so much in the comics, but in terms of helping you with your comics and other things in your life that eventually become part of your comics?
Mm-hmm. I don't get to see him as much since he's moved to another city, but he's always been a kind of muse to me, too. He also is a reluctant muse, like my mother. Like, I don't think he doesn't really like to be portrayed either. It's a shame because he's just every single thing he says is very interesting. He's a very thoughtful person. Like, he's always ruminating and philosophizing and, never just like sticking with an idea, but questioning things. So, and he's helped me out a lot as a friend, and he used to really help me a lot with feedback in my comics. Actually, I'd send him my work, and he would eviscerate it. He would just cover it in red ink in a sort of, not literally, but he was like my copy editor for a long time. I didn't really go to school very much, and I was not very well educated, but he helped me a lot with just even, there, spelling there, there, and they, there, right? Stuff like that. But also storytelling techniques and stuff. He studied film in college, and I think he helped me a lot with the visual storytelling and editing and stuff. So I used to send him everything I did, and he would send me feedback. And then after a while, it was almost like I didn't need to send him stuff because it was like his voice was already in my head. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, has anybody ever gone to his pizza place because they read about it in your comics?
I probably not.
That's a way you could return the favor.
Famous.
This is the pizza
place. If I could, I would send him over there, but I don't think I'm really known enough. It's a very suburban place. But yeah, I think people do. And I think it's disconcerting for him when he meets people and they're like, "Oh, I know you from the comic," and he's always like, "That's not me."
Well, this line of conversation is fascinating to me because it leads me to another question that I wanted to bring up in asking you how you would define your comics, because you're usually described as an autobiographical comics artist or a diarist. But in your Truth is Fragmentary collection, you begin this with a brief intro where you kind of problematize all those designations. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, it's not really a diary comic because while I begin to write about my life, it takes fictional turns where you kind of get all twisted and bendy with reality. And you don't consider yourself a journalist for similar reasons. So, I mean, how would you describe your comics, especially in light of the fact that you're usually categorized as an autobiographical writer?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's my job to say what I like. I mean, I don't feel compelled to have to say. I don't think, like, it's not, like, why do I have to say? I mean, like, you could say it's semi-autobiographical, or you could just say it's comics. I mean, it's just like, it's not really, it doesn't matter. I mean, why, I guess, why is it a question?
Oh, I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm all for, being loose, if not, completely neutral about designations like that. I mean, I would prefer to call things like this, just comics instead of trying to categorize. But, the categories do serve a purpose, libraries, bookstores, comic scholars, things of that sort.
Mm-hmm. I really don't know. I do think that there is something weird about how people focus on my life as opposed to the work. Like, it is based on my life, but the work is a whole other thing. I don't think it needs to be autobiographical. Like, it's like that TV show Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like, stories are just like stories, and like nobody's like, how should you categorize this? Like, it's a TV show.
Yeah.
The characteristics of the situations, it's all based very much on reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, I don't know, like, why do I have to say whether, like, why is that a question? Why am I even going on about this?
Well,
okay, next question.
Well, one of the things I do appreciate about your work is those times, especially when you're really playful with the boundaries of these kind of genre distinctions. And, like, two of my favorite pieces, for example, in Truth is Fragmentary is the one where the first one being where you go, your character goes to get this brain boost pill and discovers that she has a family that she forgot about, and then another family she forgot about, and then a polar bear family she forgot about. And so that starts out in a place, it reminded me sometimes of the things that Julie Doucet does, where they're dream comics, where it fixes you in a realistic situation. Like, we can imagine, you've written about having writer's block before, so starting out with writer's block makes perfect sense. And so we're fixed in this, this autobiographical reading mode, and then at some point you shift it, in that same way with again, when I read Julie Doucet's work, or Julie Doucet's work, that you don't realize it's a dream until something horrible happens to somebody physically or something in it that couldn't possibly happen. And there's something really, I think, liberating even as a reader about that it just says, kind of stop caring about these boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a liberating thing. It's true.
Yeah, I want to second Andy in saying that the brain booster story in Truth is Fragmentary is one of the highlights. That's one of my favorite parts as well. And I find it interesting that soon after that short story in the collection, then you give us an account of your trip to the con in Colombia, and there, what's so fascinating about it is that you treat yourself not as you don't write with an autobiographical voice, but you treat yourself much more objectively as if you were a character, and that's what you are in these series of strips. And that chronologically, did you write that soon after the brain booster bit?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, because that was the summer I was trying to read Montaigne. I think I had the July diary, and then that fall I went to Colombia. And it was just, like a conceit I wanted to try. Like I'd done a lot of diaries of traveling, like travelogues. And I was starting to get sick of my own first-person voice and, like, stranger in a strange land kind of, like, the same old thing. So I thought it would be funny or a sort of a good experiment to have a fictional character, like, narrate my adventures. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of fun. It was easy, it was great to step away and have this other character make fun of me for a change.
and that this was like an intern or somebody, an assistant working for you. Horrible things happen to that person too along the way. That's fun. That's sort of fun too.
Yeah, I was kind of like a martyr or something, yeah. Like a long-suffering, a servant.
Now, Andy mentioned something about fun. One of the things that strikes me in reading your comics is in many of them, a lot of that fun really comes through. And I'm curious, how much fun is it to represent this fun? Because there are also those comics, and we've referenced these earlier, where the gist of the short piece is the anxiety you have about having to come up with an idea, or you grudgingly picking up the pen and you'd rather do something else. So, are doing these diary type comics really enjoyable to you? Is the fun I sense really embedded in the comics you create?
Sometimes not. I think like with any job, there's the fun elements, and then there's the drudgery, and there's the misery of just not knowing what you're going to do next. Or, it's like the anxiety and the happiness are just so close together. It's almost hard to see. It's way too tightly wound. But yeah, there are moments of fun.
Well, one of the places it seems like a lot of fun shows up in some of your diary pieces, or in the stories where you're interacting with other cartoonists, and that's another thing I really appreciate about your work, is kind of getting to see the insides. This really honest look at what being an independent cartoonist is like, from the kind of daily struggles to going to these international shows and stuff. And one of the things I think you say a few times is that you meet a cartoonist, and if you've never met him before, you're kind of instantly friends because you have this kind of shared baseline of experience. So what are some of the things that or specifically create that bond, do you think, between cartoonists? Like, what are the things that when you meet a new cartoonist that you're kind of instantly connected over?
I think, somebody who is going to spend so much time alone drawing the same thing over and over and over again. I think there's a certain set of characteristics, like, obviously creativity, but, like this kind of like need to control, like, it's like like the kind of comics I do, the indie comics, tends to be like somebody who wants to control the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also it tends to be introverted people.
Mm.
I think there's a disorder. Yeah, I think there's this combination of wanting to control something, even though it's just paper. I think it has to do with that, like, or possibly feeling like you have no control in the world, and so controlling this whole world on the page. I don't know, egotism, like this wanting to create these whole worlds for people and be the auteur of them, but at the same time not being very good with people. Because comics don't require you to have to talk much to or work much with other people. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
So, yeah, I think when cartoonists meet each other, they're like, they kind of speak the same language. The introverted language.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are those times when those moments together seem to be something almost transcendent for you, at least momentarily. And I'm thinking about some of the scenes in, again, I'm referencing Truth is Fragmentary, when you were in Switzerland and you were introduced to drawing roulette. Which is really fun. Yeah, it's really cool. And then when you get back home, you attempt to do it with your American artist friends, and it doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah, I think that we Americans tend to be more independent and doing our own thing. We want to do our own thing. Where any other culture really, they tend to learn to be more communal and collaborative. And, I mean, you could even say open-minded to other people's ideas. That's our fault as Americans. And I think this is true. I think Americans are. I mean, we might even be considered. That might be considered admirable, like the sense of individuality. And in some terms, in some ways, in many ways, it's admirable. But yeah, we could probably learn to listen to other people and open up and pay attention to others, myself included. Yeah, so I think that is definitely like a European versus American thing. It's just, how we learn, what our habits are and stuff.
Well, it's interesting that how the drawing.
Oh, and it's also my own agenda that I just I had these preconceived ideas that I wanted other people to conform to, and people just do things differently in different cultures too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's interesting how that the drawing roulette, the thing that kind of breaks down when you bring it to America is that when the rules are established, when you're doing it in Switzerland, it's just everybody kind of accepts the rules, and this is what we do, and then when you're doing it back home, it's, let's change the rules. And that so what you were describing as that kind of American individuality, I think that made me think about that particular aspect of that way that game changes.
Yeah. It's really fun, though, to draw with your peers. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it's the best thing we have to improvisational acting, like with actors. Like if you have a good thing going, it can be really delightful. Mm-hmm. I mean, masterpieces are not created that way, but friendships can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as Andy pointed out a moment ago, some of your most memorable comics are those where you bring in other creators, many of which your readers are going to be familiar with. It's like, oh, this person, you hang out with them, you went to a con, or you shared a table with them. And And so you tend to come back to that kind of relationship frequently in your comics. Do you feel that you're the subject of other creators' comics? Do you appear as a character in their works much?
Not so much. Sometimes I see myself like a younger cartoonist will put me in their comics. And I like that. That's nice. I always find that nice. Even if, I don't know. I don't get portrayed in other people's comics that much. But I generally like it when I do.
It seems like it's akin to having a superhero universe, and here's the crossover where. I always used to think of that when I'd read like Seth and Joe Matt and Chester Brown.
Yeah, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, and then this week's guest star or whatever it is. So.
The only real thing I can relate to that, because I'm not into superheroes, is like when I was a kid and watching sitcoms.
Sure.
Sometimes like a character from a sitcom would just show up or something.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Fonzie drops in on Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, there's this big green room in the sky where all the gods are hobnobbing.
Yeah. Or like on the old Scooby-Doo where stars would show up. I remember I was excited when Don Knotts appeared on Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I just barely have that somewhere in my my conscious.
Well, Gabrielle, I know that your blog, which is a way that many people keeps up with your work. I mean, do you consider that the the centerpiece of your comics work? That if people want to get to know your work, that they should go to GabrielleBell.com?
I haven't really been updating it so much lately, except for the July Diary. But I try to put up announcements and stuff there. Yeah, I think that would be. There's also, I have an Instagram, and I also do Patreon. So like for as little as $2 a month, you can read all kinds of diary comics for free. But I'm doing it for free this month for the July Diary. Mm-hmm. But so yeah, I have my blog, which is GabrielleBell.com, and I'm on Instagram, which is Ms.Gabrielle Bell. And then in Twitter and Facebook.
Well, I would really encourage you listeners to check out and contribute to that Patreon campaign, because one of the things I really appreciate about it is not only keeping up with the diary comics that don't come out otherwise, but also that you occasionally dig into your past diaries and bring back things from like 2005 and so on. So those things feel like supplements or whatever to the voyeurs or other of your earlier works.
Oh, so you're a reader. You're a patron.
Yeah. Well, I slipped that in subtly.
Well, thank you for your service.
Now, do you still refer to your comics like on the blog and now on Patreon? I mean, as Lucky? Like I know for a while. I mean, we were getting actual publications, the mini comics and the books that had the title Lucky on them. But I've seen in the past that you've referred to the comics on your blog as Lucky. I mean, do you still feel that way? Do you still call it Lucky?
No, I don't know. That's just there. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I mean, that was my series, but the whole medium has changed. It used to be pamphlets, and now it's a blog. That's all.
Well, Gabrielle, we want to thank you for being on the Comics Alternative and taking the time to talk with us about not only your new book, which just recently came out, Everything Is Flammable, but your blog and your Patreon account. And again, we want to recommend that people either on the blog, GabrielleBell.com, or on Patreon, check out your currently running 2017 July diary.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
So I'm glad we got to have that conversation with Gabrielle Bell to talk about not only Everything Is Flammable, but her July diaries, and even a little bit of, actually a lot about Truth is Fragmentary too, which is a great book as well.
Yeah, Truth is Fragmentary is one of my favorites. And, we had talked about doing this interview in either May or June. I am glad that things didn't work out until getting to July, because we are in the middle of the month right now. So we got to talk about the first half of her 2017 July diary.
Yeah.
So great stuff. Everyone should check out her website, GabrielleBell.com. And as we pointed out, definitely support her on Patreon. And you can find a link to her Patreon page from GabrielleBell.com. So definitely do support her and read all the good stuff from Gabrielle Bell.
Yep.
And if you want to find great comics like Gabrielle's, then you would do well to visit the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com, and there you will find a slew of discounts every single month. Quite impressive. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your books there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our interview with Gabrielle Bell. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
You can also get a hold of us via email. We are two guys at comicsalternative.com. And you can also get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And we also have our Twitter feed, which you can check out at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. But you can find us elsewhere on social media, such as on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us, let us know how we're doing, and find out what we're doing.
That's right. And we've got more interviews lined up for this summer, so check back for those. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.